Hi, and welcome to another episode of You Haven't Seen What? A married couple's quest to rectify the wrongs of their partner never seeing culturally relevant movies. Hi, I'm Joelle.
I'm Parry.
And we're that married couple.
Last time I checked.
I just changed my name, so I figured.
Yeah, finally got to it.
I did.
Took 3 years, but we're there.
Whatever.
So we were traveling a bit. You know, TSA frowns upon names that don't match on your credit card and your tickets, or your ticket and your ID. So yeah, it was probably a good idea to leave that until now.
Yep. So I finally did it. Yay, we're official.
Hooray.
Hooray.
Oh, now you own half of all my good junk.
I don't want any of your junk.
And you've never even seen inside the storage shed all the way.
I've seen enough. I've seen enough, folks. I've seen
Yes.
enough to know.
Whenever you hear me say, I've got one of those somewhere in storage.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's probably true. I mean, considering that he has pretty much enough costumes for the entire movie Boogie Nights in that storage shed. Yeah.
Yeah. Lots of good 70s stuff.
True story.
Nancy Jarzinko, I'm looking at you.
Nancy, please take it off of our hands. Please.
I might have to donate them to you.
Yes. Might, for sure. We will pay you. We will ship them to you.
Nancy is a costumer on a lot of films and television shows. If you IMDb her, you'll see all the great stuff she's worked on. But I think she might actually be able to find a real purpose other than hanging in a storage shed out in the Southwest to not even hanging, laying.
To disintegrate. Yep.
There's a little dry rot going on out there.
Yep, exactly. So yeah, hi, welcome you guys. Thanks for joining us on another episode / wild ride. This time we are talking, I don't know why, about UHF.
Speaking of things that should be in the storage shed.
Speaking of things that should never be seen ever again.
Channel 62 has the lowest ratings in the history of television. What they need is a new station manager.
No, not him. Forget it. No way.
A man of action. A man of courage. A man of vision. What they get is a man so desperate, he'll put anyone on the air. Orion Pictures presents Weird Al Yankovic in UHF, the movie.
Hey. And wait, I actually want to have a disclaimer. Number one, you are a gigantic Weird Al fan.
Huge.
Enormous. To
the point where, as you well know, because you bought me front row seats at a show recently.
Not recently.
Well, it was the mandatory tour. So, the mandatory fun tour, yes. And
3 years ago.
And, you know, I dressed up as White and Nerdy, and Weird Al sang to me. He sang all about the Pentiums looking at me. And my favorite line, which is, what kind of chip you got in there? A Dorito?
Yeah, my husband is that nerdy.
To give you the whole line, that your Commodore 64 is really neato. What kind of chip you got in there? A Dorito? My William Shatner-esque reading does it no justice.
It did no justice. I don't even know if we're going to do UHF any justice. Quite frankly, I've had a Red Bull in order to keep my energy up while talking about this movie.
I think you needed one the night we watched it because you did fall asleep a couple of times. And I think at one point you sort of woke up with a start and stared at the screen for a minute and said, what is happening? Not what is happening as though, what have I missed? It was what is happening? Like, how can this be happening right now? I cannot understand what is happening in front of me right now.
That's pretty much how I felt through the entire fucking movie. But that's here nor there. What I wanted to do was have a disclaimer. So my husband loves Weird Al, and I actually... Dearly. So yeah, Weird Al... Big fans, at least one big fan and one not so bad fan. I mean, I do know the words to Stuck in a Closet with Vanna White. I mean, I do know the words to a lot of songs that aren't just your mainstream Weird Al songs. So to be fair, we are fans of Weird Al. One of us a larger fan than the other. However, how fucking ever, my husband decided to show me UHF for the first time. And I thought I would find something remotely good about it. redeeming.
Not even Spatula City, huh?
Maybe. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe Spatula. I mean, it wasn't all bad. It just wasn't really good at all. And so what's hard is that, we review these cult movies, I feel like sometimes, and that have a deep, deep following. And I think this was more painful for me to watch than The Dark Crystal. Yeah. I mean, possibly even Mosquito Coast.
This was painful for me, admittedly, because I haven't watched this since college. So it's been a while. In fact,
you didn't watch it when it first came out?
No, actually, I was we'll say a developing Weird Al fan when the film came out, and I think I wanted to see it in the theater, but you have to remember, part of what killed the movie was the summer it came out, the summer of 1989, and this was the summer of Batman, Ghostbusters 2,
I don't think that's why I killed
Crusade,
the movie.
And it contributed to very few people seeing it, though, because there were so many huge movies that summer, and I went to all of those.
It couldn't be the one star that happened from Siskel and Ebert, no.
It was not the sleeper hit of the summer, we will say that.
No, it did not save Orion.
But might have contributed to Orion's death.
Demise, maybe.
But I will say I had not watched it since I had seen it on VHS. Maybe it's better on VHS.
No. Sorry.
What I will say, Weird Al is one of those great artists who you can enjoy throughout your life, but is best discovered at that time in your life as a teenager when you discover things like They Might Be Giants and some of those other artists that are satirical, and they're sort of taking the piss out of some of the really serious things in the world. Because at that age, you're starting to realize some things take themselves over seriously and you want to poke some fun at them. And that continues throughout your life, but you're really discovering that at that point. And I think it's They Might Be Giants who even said, we keep getting older, but we keep those same older fans, but all our fans, we seem to develop at a very young age. And I think it's the same with Weird Al. And I think he's brilliant in his music. I think the way he can either write his own originals or turn what he's most famous for, of course, turning a song into a parody. And it's amazing. It's extraordinary what he can do with those. And those pieces do not a great film make. Trying to string those pieces that work great in a music video do not necessarily combine as well into a film. And there is some nostalgia at play here, that there are things about it that I still adore and find uproariously funny. But I have to...
Wheel of Fish!
Yes, we'll talk about Getty in a bit. But I feel like it was not what I remembered, and that it was not quite as entertaining as I had thought, probably when I was very stoned on a couch in college with a whole bunch of bite-sized Snicker wrappers scattered about.
Oh, boy. Well, I shouldn't say the funny part, and maybe we should, after we talk about this, you should go back to our actual format. We'll see. But I think the most interesting part to me, like all of these cult movies that you seem to be bringing to my attention, and that we keep loving and adoring, and probably why we're reviewing them, because we think they have not given enough, prominence in our time, is that you're not the only one that feels this way, or you're not the only one who remembers this movie this way. There are some serious fan sites devoted to UHF.
Deeply.
Serious fan sites. They went and they tracked down the locations. Like, there are multiple people who tracked down the locations for UHF. There are people who just still think it's the greatest movie of all time. I don't know the last time they watched it was. But yeah, it's like number one on like a couple of people's lists. And so you're not the only one who feels that way.
Who feels that, has the nostalgia for it, or feels like it's not quite what I remember?
Both. Both. But I would say has the nostalgia for it. I think that quite a few people feel like it's something special. And it is something special, all right? Yeah, if you haven't seen UHF, don't watch it. Sorry.
You know, I didn't even go that far with The Golden Child.
No, because The Golden Child has some really super funny moments and actually good areas of acting.
Look, I don't know about good areas of acting.
Stop it. Stop it.
But, you know, there are sections of this, like, I mean, how can you not find Gandhi 2 fun?
Sure. So here you go. Synopsis. Looking at you, Parry.
I think there is no better way to synopsize this film than to use Weird Al's own description, which in promotional interviews he used to say that it's a cross between Son of Flubber, Sophie's Choice, and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Oh, God.
And I think there is no more apt description.
I have one. UHF. Undeniably horrific foolishness.
Okay.
That's what I wrote down when I saw the movie.
Yeah, that's not the one I'm putting in iTunes.
Oh, fine.
I think trying to describe it is part of the problem.
Which problem?
In the simplest terms, it has the same plot as 1,000, not just 80s movies, but, you know, you can go anywhere from Breakin' 2 all the way to Ready Player One, where it's the little guys against the big guy, and the big guy wants to
It's called David and Goliath.
Yeah, exactly. And it goes all the way back. And it is, you know, a story told a million times. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work as well. That's why it has been said that maybe they should have done something like a Kentucky Fried Movie, something that was just a series of skits strung together. I think that's where the strength of this film really is. So
I would agree with you. I think that the parodies and the pieces like Spatula City and Wheel of Fish and the Gandhi 2 trailer, even the Rambo one where his face doesn't match his neck. I think those are all actually the stronger parts of this film. Them talking about whatever they're doing, it does not work. The plot does not work.
And it wasn't entirely necessary in terms of even trying to have sort of a love subplot with Victoria Jackson really wasn't necessary. And so I think they could have trimmed a lot of that out and made a lot more room. They could have kept the basic plot, but made a lot more room for the parodies. I think there wasn't enough of that. And you could have packed it with more, I feel like, and had a better film overall.
So what's your favorite quote?
Well, I was really tempted to go with take life by the lips and yank really hard, because it's kind of like a Yankovic reference, or badgers. We don't need no stinking badgers. But I think in the end, I had to go with, if you took their combined IQ and multiplied it by 100, you might have enough intelligence to tie your shoe.
Are you talking about everybody who was a part of this film?
No.
I am going to totally be the devil's advocate. I'm sorry. I watch so much of the movies that you make me watch without giving me any warning. And this one, I also did not have any warning. So if I sound bitter, it's just because I didn't have any actual warning that I was going to be in for a roller coaster. Because I don't think you remembered it that way.
I did not. And that's what I'm saying, is that I was just as surprised as you were by not enjoying it as much as I thought I would. And remember, this was my birthday choice. And
I know this was your like, this is what I want to show my wife on my birthday.
And remember, again,
I could pick any movie and she has to say yes. So by being your birthday choice, I also got to watch this after my birthday as well. Just saying.
Well, and now it will forever be inextricably tied with your birthday. You'll never be able to forget UHF as tied to your birthday.
We really need to watch something else. I just want to say one more thing, because I picked Gandhi.
That wasn't, I thought your birthday choice was going to be Clue.
It is, but we're not going to release that for a while, technically. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, It could be my birthday choice. That is my birthday choice. However, I gave you Gandhi and you gave me UHF.
My idea was to have a lighthearted follow-up that was connected through the Gandhi 2 parody.
Which happens to me, my actual quote from the Gandhi 2 trailer parody.
Yes.
It says, he's a one-man wrecking crew, but he knows how to party. And I just thought that really summed up the entire movie in that it was a wreck. But some parts, okay, were fun and lighthearted. So that's why I picked that one. Mm-hmm. I think it sums up the entire film pretty well. Is that fair?
Yeah, it's fair.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I'm struggling because this is hard for me to do. Actually, I meeting Weird Al and finding him to be, and twice. And finding him to be as pleasant as you always wanted him to be, like the nicest person.
He says that it's a train wreck too. It's okay. He says it in interviews that it's not everything that he wanted it to be either.
Yeah.
So he says it himself that this did not come out the way I thought it was going to come out. It was a little bit of a train wreck. We should have gone with other things. We were trying to make the studio happy. We thought we could really have this whole plot line. Like he and Jay Levy say that. Is it Levy?
I think it's Levy.
So he and
Levy.
Levy, right? So
yeah.
he and Jay Levy, kind of sort of say it themselves. Like we should have done something closer to a Kentucky Fried Movie. Like we should have done just parodies. That's really where our strength lied. But we thought we had this plot and we thought we could work it out and it would be good. And they both have sort of said, not so great. So I don't think that we're saying anything that they themselves haven't said. And granted, we didn't create those things. So, it's like you're always your own worst critic in a way. And so many people have bashed this movie. I mean, and we're not going to do that. That's not who we are. I think making fun of it is actually a very Weird Al thing to do. Believe me, if I had enough time, I would come up with other parodies of how bad it was.
He does talk a lot about the cut sequences. People are like, why won't you do a director's cut? He's like, they were cut because they suck. He actually says in the commentary on the DVD, and he shows the scenes and he makes fun of the scenes that were cut. So he is aware of certain things that
he's aware of the suckage.
Yes. And like I said, though, it's difficult because I am that kind of fan that it's hard for me not to like it. What I feel like as a completist, you should own it. It should be in your Weird Al shelf. You just don't really need to watch it.
That's a lot coming from you. I really have to say that's actually a lot. Those are strong words as you're in your Weird Al Christmas tree t-shirt in February. Today's February.
Well, that's what I'm saying is you should watch it. But just the once to remind yourself of the very funny parts and just ignore those other things and keep it on the shelf up there with the full collection, because no Weird Al collection is complete without UHF. But I think it's one of those artifacts that goes in the collection that
it should not go in the fucking time capsule. Go fuck yourself. It does not belong.
The Al time capsule?
It does not belong in the time capsule. It doesn't even belong in the Al time capsule. He's just done so much more other things that are just infinitely better that it should not go in the Weird Al time capsule.
Yes. And again, of course, not everything can be a winner. And there are some of his albums that I think, are Library of Congress preserved forever level of...
And then there's Polka Party.
Of clever and...
Well, no, it didn't go gold either. Neither did UHF. I'm just saying statements of fact. I'm not whatever. I actually like the polka renditions that are on each album. I find them amusing myself. Yes. You know that I have serious love for Weird Al.
I do. I know you do. I know you are. I know your dislike for this movie is not a dislike for Al.
No, in fact, I think I'm so upset that I dislike the movie because I do like Weird Al, even in his crazy. So I think that's really where I'm coming from on any of it. Now, I guess we should sort of say a little bit about the actual movie itself, other than just saying why you should or should not watch it, or why you should or should not inflict this upon anybody else if you decide to rewatch it. Perry, I'm looking at you. It's a good thing we do.
I kind of want to go rewatch it and just go like,
no. Not while I'm home. You can rewatch it when I'm at a conference or something. Please don't watch it while I'm home.
I feel like I need a do-over with this.
Good.
Maybe it was too late at night.
Do it over on your headphones somewhere else. Just not in this house while I'm in it. Sorry. That's harsh, but so the basis of the entire film is this guy is taking over a failing TV station, a cable TV network, right?
A
UHF.
dreamer named George Newman.
A dreamer, okay.
He's kind of like a Walter Mitty. He's always daydreaming.
And so he sort of puts together all these weird things because he figures out that people want all this weird, obscure crap after Stanley, the janitor, inadvertently goes on the TV and everybody's hooked and watching this craziness, which on a larger spectrum really points and shows like, yeah, we do want to watch all this crazy shit. I watch a ton of crazy, stupid reality TV so I can zone out of my life and think that it's not so bad. I'm very well caught up on the Real Housewives. Don't judge me. Yes, I am a PhD candidate and I'm serious. And one day we'll have doctor in front of my name, but I'm all caught up with that. I'm all caught up with the Below Decks. I'm all caught up with Vanderpump Rules. Bravo. This is a big shout out for you. So
whenever you study death in your school, your academic life, but you watch the death of Western culture in your off time.
Well, I am part of the real world culture. Mm-hmm. I grew up with it. I watched a ton of the real world till it got so obviously scripted and they were putting people in rooms. I'm a fan of...
There was a point it wasn't obviously scripted?
Well, there was. I was younger then. Remember, I'm younger than you by 4 years. So there is this point at which I do watch a lot of reality TV to go ahead and escape reality. I want to watch the stupidness that's going on and live vicariously a little bit. Sure. So what UHF's programming really did was really show you all this weird, crappy shit that people want to watch all the time. Cue Jerry Springer, like everyone wanted to watch Jerry because a fight was going to break out, some craziness was going to break out. It was just odd and berserk and you just couldn't predict it.
And they made early fun of that with Town Talk, because that's pre-Jerry. That's more like Morton Downey era.
Exactly. Morton Downey?
Yeah. Wasn't that the guy who used to have the talk show way back in the day? Like
Maury Povich?
No. I think it was Morton Downey Jr. Let's take a moment to look that up.
Insert music here. Oh, you're right. Oh yeah, trash TV.
Yeah, he was one of the first.
Yeah.
He was one of the originators of this shit.
Oh, that's because when it was on, I was little.
Yeah, it's way, way back. I never watched. I remember seeing commercials for it as a kid, but I never watched it. So, but yeah, he was one of the first to do this kind of thing.
Yeah. Interesting.
But at least I do know that.
Yes, you do know that. So, I mean, back then, we were watching it a little bit on those talk shows, but just not the same way. And so in a way, it almost predicted that this is really what we want to watch.
And there's an article from the LA Weekly from 2014 where they talk about how he kind of was ahead of the curve and that culture caught up with him eventually in all of this where weird is cool. Because weird wasn't as cool that was kind of his whole shtick in the 80s was that, hey, I'm weird and there are some weirdos out there and you're going to like my stuff. But it was that outsider kind of thing. But the outsider has become the insider over time. And they were talking about that a little bit on its 25th anniversary, I think it was.
Right. So, I mean, that part I think is foreboding and great. That piece. Should we talk about? So,
and I think that is where it is sort of a historical artifact, is that it did predict a number of things.
Was that just not the writing on the wall, though? I mean, that's what he continues to do, right? Is he pokes fun of things that are relevant at the time.
Yeah, he always deflates things well.
So he parodies it. Mm-hmm. So it opens up with this big Indiana Jones scene,
which I love because it is the kind of
actually good,
and it's the kind of silly, parody, dorky humor that really reflects that this was very Zucker Brothers inspired. In fact, Airplane is one of Weird Al's favorite movies.
Correct.
And you could, without even knowing that, you would know that this scene was inspired by Zucker Brothers' style of humor.
Right. So it was, and that was a great scene, actually. And then we just sort of get into, George's life sort of after that, which was a little bit lackluster.
Well, again, love plot unnecessary, and there are funny moments like the fact that he lives next to the karate studio and people come flying through the windows, or the arm comes through the wall with the watch when he says what time is it so he can check there's great moments of little humor, but that's the thing, it's not enough moments to stitch together with this other plot about trying to keep the station alive and about the his love with Victoria Jackson.
With Terry.
Yes. And though they're totally over the top, the scenes with R.J. Fletcher, played by Kevin McCarthy, I think are a lot of fun. They're silly and ridiculous, and he's chewing the scenery like nobody's business. But I think that makes it a lot of fun to see him that way. That's him at his best, is being that comical villain.
I agree. Do we want to do good, bad, and ugly, even though I think we've been sort of doing that all along?
Yeah.
Okay. So what's your good?
Spatula City.
Okay, that's fair. My good was actually the Money for Nothing parody.
Oh, yeah.
So that was really amazing. That video is really amazing.
It's shot for shot.
Right, for the Dire Straits, Money for Nothing, which was really the Beverly Hillbillies. They actually have it titled, because it's a legal thing, Money for Nothing / Beverly Hillbillies,
which Al hates because usually he gets to just keep the parody title. But the reason they did that in particular was because Mark Knopfler of Dire Straits wanted to be a part of this. That's very rare. That it would usually be Al's usual band, and instead Knopfler wanted to play the guitar, and so you see him in the video, playing the guitar.
So not only does Knopfler play the guitar, the keyboardist from Dire Straits also plays the keyboards.
Mm-hmm.
So Guy Fletcher is also on it.
Yes. So it's amazing that they wanted to be in it and that they're having fun with it. And, we have a little Princess Bride crossover there with Knopfler. So, maybe they should have done some more Princess Bride parody with his Storybook Story song in there.
Stop it. Storybook Story. That's like your most hated song of your life. You hate that song so bad. Mark Knopfler, I'm sorry. My husband is a crab.
Hey, I love a lot.
Everybody else loves Storybook Story. No, doesn't do it for you.
Have I ever really been one to love what everyone else loves?
No, as witnessed by UHF. Moving on. Oh, don't.
I'm having some heartaches over this.
I know.
I
know. I'm taking pop shots, or I can get them.
I know. I'm an easy target on this one.
Because normally you're like, oh, I love this really geeky movie, and I'm just gonna stick to my love of the geeky movie. And you're like, I will defend it until my death. And this one, you looked at me, you're like, oh boy.
I think it's the danger of doing a podcast like this, with the premise being, we're showing the film to our spouse that didn't grow up with it and so has no nostalgia attached to it. In fact, has often been colored in their view of it by how many people talk about how great a film is, and then it's hard to live up to that. But this was one where, I was just as surprised. The nostalgia was not where I'd hoped it would be. So let's move on with Good, Bad, Ugly.
Okay. So you're bad.
I don't even know where to.
Oh boy.
To start. I think I will say I think it could have used another couple rewrites. The script is just. It's not that the script is thin. It just feels so deeply underdeveloped that I think a couple of rewrites. and maybe giving it to someone else to do a punch-up of it could have actually improved a lot of it. And really, if you just took out a few of the little subplots and things, I think you really could have built. There's a whole rewrite we could do on this film that we could talk about, but that's not our podcast. That one already exists. But I think that
Really, a film rewrite podcast?
Nice.
Nice.
Yep, I think it's on Maximum Fun, but I'm forgetting the name of it right off.
Oh, really? You're forgetting the name.
I know, on one of my favorite networks.
I know, of all time.
Yes.
I don't know.
With
I
the
feel
fabulous
like
Jesse Thorne.
You're so ridiculous. I feel like this is like tantamount to if you were ever to say that John Hodgman sucked. Like,
I could never do that.
I know, but I'm saying I feel like it's the same level, like your adult self versus your college self.
Yeah, I feel like if John Hodgman made a film that he had written and starred in, and it was really awful, I would have a really hard time admitting to that. I wouldn't want to say I didn't like it. It would be tough. Now, Hodgman did write a pilot for an autobiographical, semi-autobiographical TV series where it would be him growing up and he's an adult, but he's playing himself as a kid and all the other cast members are kids, which I guess could get a little creepy in some ways, but the pilot, there's a show on Maximum Fun called Dead Pilot Society, and they do table readings for pilots that never got made. And they do that one, and it's great. So I would have hope for Hodgman creating a show or a movie. But yes, it would be very hard for me, much as this is very hard for me to admit.
Yeah, I agree with you. And my bad, I don't... the plot really wasn't great. I mean, honestly, if you took out all those other pieces, the parody pieces are really wonderful. So, or pretty wonderful. I mean, there's some things in there that I'm like, and I wince a little bit, but that's also me watching it through today's lenses versus 80s lenses. A lot of shit was okay back in the 80s. So,
do you have a particular example?
I mean, I have several examples, but and things that were taken out of the movie because they weren't okay back then.
Oh, like the
throwing the poodles, like.
Well, that is in the movie.
No, it's in the movie, but I'm saying like when they put it out on like network, like Comedy Central and stuff, they take it out. It's a little bit like, hey, what?
No, I was gonna say a couple of the TV ads that were cut were ones that Al himself looks at and he's like, oh yeah, no, thank God we cut that.
Right.
Yeah, because there were a few that were inappropriate.
Cringeworthy.
Yes.
Right.
Rather.
So what's your ugly?
I think I have already expressed the ugly. The ugly is my pain.
It's your pain. It has nothing to do with the movie. I mean, it has everything to do with the movie, but it has nothing to do with the actual content of the movie.
Like, I think I might have done the ugly cry afterwards.
Oh my God. This is pretty bad that you admit this. I mean, I don't think I could ever talk about one of my beloved movies and say that it was the worst thing I've ever seen in my life.
Again, I had not watched this. I think I had it in my mind from the last time I had seen it, which I would say was probably around 1995 or 6. And I had watched it with the usual suspects, Brian, Ed, and I can be honest and say I was probably stoned out of my damn mind. And I probably found it to be uproariously funny and with no foundation whatsoever. And so, yeah, I can be completely honest and say that...
I like how you're admitting to a criminal act. Statute of limitations has run out.
Okay,
don't
good.
worry, you're fine. But I mean, for next level employers, I mean, just wondering, just saying. I was not stoned in college. That's the most amazing part about my college life. I was like the goody two shoes designated driver all the time. I was the people getting people out of trouble.
I served that role often, but this was not one of those times. This was a Rice Krispie treats are the greatest food on the earth kind of a night.
Oh boy.
So I can be honest about where my headspace was the last time I saw it and why I might have had delusions.
All right. I mean, my ugly is just that they obviously saying some very non-PC, not okay stuff, but that's the freaking 80s.
Such as one of the lines that I still guiltily laugh at, where...
no, don't repeat it.
Not the supplies line?
No, you should not repeat any of it. No, it's not okay. It's not okay. You can guiltily laugh by yourself, but you don't need to spread it out into the universe.
Yeah, it's even with the Wheel of Fish. It's a great scene. I love Gedde Watanabe. I met him in L.A., super nice, friendly guy. As he plays the character of Cooney in this movie, and he has some moments that you are really questionable in terms, just the accent, just the joking on the accent, I think is what's so questionable there.
Well, I think, and here's the thing is that he even said, Gedde even said in an interview later, hey, I was taking what was available at the time because really I just wanted to work. And so if it was that role, I mean, I might not have been 100% playing it comfortably, but I played it because it's that role and there's still comedy in it, even though it might be poking fun. I mean, the whole film poked fun, essentially, is what he's saying.
Yeah. And
like no one was spared, essentially. So I don't know if that makes it any better that no one was spared, but it definitely makes it feel like, hey, this probably wasn't a racist thing. This probably was just a making fun of an accent thing, which can be deemed as racist thing. I just think it just depends on what.
Or at least there was no gong that went off every time he said something.
I can't with the gong. 16 Candles, long duck dong. Yes.
That was another one of those films that I watched, having not seen it in a long time. And we've talked about this, that you're just in disbelief that you ever found it funny. And that they would have even done that. And I know the difference of time and what we considered funny, but
time
still.
And space.
Yeah.
Time and space. So, yeah. Should we go into production notes?
Well, that makes for a good segue, because when it comes to time and space, it is never okay to do what Michael Richards later did. And, he is, of course, one of the huge stars of this film as Stanley Spadowski, Stanley's Playhouse. And he is very funny as the idiot in this movie. He has a great, these floors are dirty as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore network reference moment. And he plays his character well. And the ad-lib stuff he did, like with the cornflakes and the army man, is utterly ridiculous, but still funny. And of course, we, who didn't love Kramer? But sadly, the incident of 2006 where he was being heckled, or first they were talking and then he was being heckled, and he basically went off on a couple of black men who were talking in a comedy show and just went over the top to the point of saying, like, 50 years ago, you'd be hanging upside down if you did this or something. And it's very, it's very hard to, even in a moment of anger and rage, saying that, where is that coming from? What deeper part of you is holding that? And so it was hard to watch him and not think of that public outburst. And so that sort of colored this as well. Maybe the wrong choice of words.
Yes, definitely the wrong choice of words as you look at your mixed wife.
So, yeah.
Jesus.
So this it put a sour note on the film too, to see Michael Richards and have to remember that. And we've talked about this a lot on this podcast, is how hard it is to watch things knowing someone has done something. And in this case, it was not a producer, it was an actor. And so it's even harder to stare at them through the whole thing.
Right.
Luckily, Kevin Spacey was not in this too.
Oh, jeez. So, Katie, let me run down production. Directed by UHF, was released in 1989. Directed by Jay Levy. Produced by Gene Kirkwood and John Hyde. Written by Weird Al and Jay Levy, who was also his manager, longtime manager at that point. Music by John Duprez. He did the score and Weird Al. Cinematography, David Lewis. Edited by Dennis O'Connor. Production company was Cinecorp. Distributed by Orion, no longer. Release date, July 21st, 1989. Running time, 97 long-ass minutes. Budget of $5 million. And made $6.1. Rotten Tomato. And listen, I have something to say. I know we all love things, but we need to be truthful with ourselves. All right, because Rotten Tomatoes got 63% from the critics, but 77% approval from the audience. And even the IMDb rating of 7 out of 10, I think is higher than Legend of Billie Jean. I'm literally going to look it up right now. But that's a damn shame, because Legend of Billie Jean was way freaking better than this.
Well, the interesting thing, and this is part of the legend of the film, is that it actually had one of the highest test audience ratings of all time up to that point. And I forget which one had the highest, but they were shocked and amazed and elated that it had scored so high. And so they expanded its release and made it a bigger deal than they were going to. And I think that's part of what made it such a disaster, was because they really expected so much. Now, I don't know if Stanley Spadowski's family was in this audience or who these people were that made this film so highly rated. I really don't get what occurred. Now, I've been in a test audience, and I know how it works, and I was one of those who was called in afterwards to talk about the movie. And I will tell you that it was a Jean-Claude Van Damme film called, of all things, Replicant, and where he played an artificial human. I called it Replicant because it was so bad. And I made a lot of comments about it. And the final film they released had been edited quite a bit. And I don't think they necessarily took my changes, but some of the things I thought they should change, they did. But I've been a part of that process. And I know there's like, you know, at least when I did it, there was a little knob that you would turn on the seat that you would turn higher when you liked something and lower when you didn't. And if you really didn't care, you'd kind of leave it in the middle. The trick was, if you wanted to get out of having to sit in the focus group afterwards, you tried to keep close to the middle, but not too much, because then you were suspect, because you got paid to do this. And so, at least with the TV shows, I can't remember if I got paid for the movie, but you'd turn the wheel back and forth and try not to stand out because you just wanted to go home. But in this case, I got called in for the focus group and talked about it a little bit. But I'm just wondering if
who was in that audience?
Yeah. Were these just diehard Al fans who just would not let it fail?
All males.
It was too big to fail.
All males.
Were they all males, 14 and under?
I don't know.
Although a lot of males.
Some people are like, oh, yeah, like it's a kid's film. Like anybody can see it. And I'm like,
Well, you know, it was rated PG-13, actually, because of scenes like the shop teacher, as played by Emo Phillips, when he cuts his finger off. Originally, the scene had him bleeding out profusely, much longer, and he like picks it up and puts it in his pocket. They're in the outtakes that you can see it in the special features. But that scene was much longer, and there were a couple others that earned it a PG-13 rating, like the Conan the Librarian cutting the person in half for having late library books. So those moments put it at that point. So I would not, I guess it could be a kid's movie, but it does have a lot of things that were not as questionable in the 80s as we would consider now.
Right. So parts of it, too, were interesting, like in the production notes, and I don't know if you were going to go through more, that it was filmed in Tulsa.
Mm-hmm. Cheap to film.
Yeah.
That's kind of like when they were filming all that stuff in New Mexico. That was tax breaks, but it's all about cost.
Yeah, and I saw that Dr. Demento had a cameo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they cut it down, but he's one of the people getting whipped cream in his mouth. But of course, being as he was one of the people who helped give Weird Al his start, it was great that he was in there.
Yep, and the part for Terry was auditioned for by Jennifer Tilly.
Mm-hmm.
And Ellen DeGeneres,
who was their first choice, but for some reason that just didn't happen, and even Weird Al supposedly doesn't know why that didn't happen.
Yep, and Crispin Glover. Did you know that he wanted to be a part of this film too?
Yeah, but he only wanted to play one role.
Correct.
Yeah,
and they said no.
He wanted to be they wanted him to be Philo,
right?
And instead, all he wanted to be was the used car salesman that says, yes. I'll club this seal. I'll club this baby seal unless you buy a car.
And they said no.
Which is surprising in no way whatsoever, because Crispin Glover is amazing in the roles he has played, but he is a lunatic. And all you have to do is listen to some of his music to really know who Crispin Glover is.
These boots are ready for walking, and that's just what they'll do. But one of these days, these boots are gonna walk all over you.
And then something else that I found weird, because I didn't really realize that this is a little bit of trivia, but to go back to the first part where you see Weird Al as Indy, well, originally, I guess Indy was supposed to be Tom Selleck.
Yes.
But he couldn't because of Magnum P.I.
Yeah.
So it would have been right if you had seen Indy with a mustache.
If they had kept the mustache for the role, yeah.
Yeah. Or no, not even for the role, but if they had kept Tom Selleck as Indy.
That's what I'm saying is that,
Yeah.
well, but if they had him keep his mustache as Indiana Jones, like they might have had him, it was iconic, and so I don't think they would have had him remove the mustache, but
Right.
they didn't have Harrison Ford grow one. So
No, because Harrison Ford wasn't known with a mustache.
Right. So that's what I'm saying is that I imagine they would have had him keep it.
Yeah.
That's actually one of my funniest scenes in the movie because it's so ridiculous. And some of the ridiculous humor works and some doesn't. But the moment where R.J. Fletcher says, and take that ridiculous thing off, and the guy's wearing a ridiculous hat, but he rips off his mustache instead. It's just,
Listen, 80s mustaches were a little ridiculous. Although Tom Selleck wears it very well. He's still wearing it to this day in Blue Bloods.
Although he looks more and more like Teddy Roosevelt with every episode. And I think that's
what they're going for.
I know. I think it's
Yeah.
intentional.
No, that's what
with
they're
those
going
little
for.
sunglasses that he's
See,
wearing.
I like how we can no longer talk about UHF, so now we're talking about Blue Bloods.
Blue Bloods has come in a couple of times here.
I know.
or
I think you're the one who normally brings it in.
or Big Moral Decision Cop Show, as I've called it.
Listen, Big Moral Decision Cop Show is sort of what this country is based off of a little bit.
Yeah.
Just FY, just in case. I'd like to bring some crime and media into it, shall we?
Or there's not influenced by the current administration political show known as Madam Secretary. Because
Stop it.
like every show now seems to have a scene where they're like, this is why this is dangerous.
Shh. Don't tell people if they haven't picked up on it. Leave it alone.
They're a little obvious, but actually a lot of them have been well written from what I've seen. So.
Listen, all I can tell y'all is that I have to tune out sometimes, and that means watching a lot of television and vegging out when I am pretty much disabled and cannot go anywhere because I have literally spent days working on some form of my dissertation. So at some point you have to decompress, and crafts are just not doing it for me any longer. And neither is baking, so it has to be TV.
Yeah, when you've been writing about sex offenders, Vanderpump actually seems pretty relaxing.
Yes, it is. Just saying. Just saying. Everyone's like, you'll never end up being your dissertation. That's good to know. So the last part that I have for our production notes is that Weird Al also slipped in a name of one of his high school clubs, the Volcano Worshippers,
Yes.
into the TV lineup show schedule. So one of his high school, they got a shout out there.
If you pause that scene or look for a still of it, there's actually some fantastic TV show names like the Fabulous World of Tractor Pulls and things like that.
It's random shit ever.
Which UHF TV, as we were saying earlier, kind of like local access TV. Like, I've talked about Los Angeles local access and things like Francine Dancer and Zuma Dog and all this
reminds
craziness.
Me of student TV at FSU.
Okay.
The outlandish crap that happened.
This is a deep and obscure cut that
What?
only a select few people would understand out there. But if you were at Florida State in the early 90s and had access to the Student Government Movie Channel, which was a closed-circuit TV station on campus, you may have seen one of the shows that I was involved in particular... No, what was the one? I don't remember the one I met you on. That one actually had a different name. The one that I worked on mostly was On the Brink, was the one that I did later with George Fawnin and the Whammo Players, and it was an improv call-in show where people would call in and make improv suggestions, and the Whammo Players still perform in Atlanta. If you ever have a chance to see them at Dad's Garage, they're fucking amazing.
They are.
And George Fawnin is still there doing an extraordinary job. But
and runs Bacon Fest.
yes, Bacon. He was the founder of Bacon Fest.
Founder of Bacon Fest.
I think the only
not Kevin Bacon, but actual bacon, like the pork product bacon.
Well, Bacon Fest,
not Cops bacon, like actual bacon.
Bacon
Sorry.
Fest 1, 2, and 3, and maybe 4 were all at Florida State at George's Place, and then he took the show on the road to Atlanta. Eventually, was able to make this a huge event in Atlanta.
Oh, they're not doing Bacon Fest this year. They're doing
No?
something different.
What is it this year?
No, they're doing Dad's Garage Big Stupid Parking Lot Carnival.
Yes.
So no longer about bacon, which it never, I guess, really was. I mean, it was, but it wasn't. But
It was
something
sponsored
else.
by like a bacon manufacturer.
Well, I don't know. Anyway, it's supposed to be pretty similar to what it's been like in the past. So that means pretty awesome.
So, yes, we did a lot of that type of ridiculous, idiotic show that a lot of people did not find funny. And so I can see where this is relatable to that. Now, for those who don't know, let's address the millennials for just a moment, as we have done. UHF, what is it? Well, UHF was sort of a short-range television signal. And whenever you had a television with dials on it, there was a dial for UHF. And as a kid, I would always kind of turn to that when all the good cartoons were off and there was nothing else on the major channels. I'd start flipping around that little UHF dial looking for something. And sometimes you found something good. Usually what you found was a bunch of static. But UHF was more for local programming. UHF signals can't go over mountains. They can't go through big buildings. They can go through into homes and things like that, but large obstacles they cannot go through. And so UHF was very much just local programming.
Exactly. So yeah, it's the shitty shows.
Pretty much, yeah.
It's the dregs, which we were also forced to watch as students at FSU.
Hey, we played a lot of good movies like Threesome because everyone always requested that fucking movie.
Whatever. Let's not talk about that. So do you have any production notes? Because I sort of ate into your time a little bit,
Well,
but I actually think that we're good.
Of crummy local TV, the sets that they built for this, they made a deal with the local TV station to work with them to build some sets, and they used them for years afterwards on one of the Tulsa TV stations. And so a lot of the sets for the show you could continue to see on your local television.
Is that like when they left up the Spatula City sign?
They did.
And people were like, what the hell?
People actually tried to go to Spatula City and were calling the sign company saying, we can't find Spatula City.
It's hysterical.
I have to tell you, I would have totally taken the exit for Spatula City and gone looking for it.
I know you would have. Hi, Walter.
Well, I mean, buy 9, get 1 for a penny. There's no better deal. In fact,
why do you need 9 spatulas?
At one point in college, Brian and I actually started giving spatulas as gifts because we thought
Spatula City, you thought it was funny?
Yeah, and I think at one point we
funny.
started painting them so that everybody got like a different artistic spatula that they could display.
KitchenAid comes out with multiple colors of spatulas.
I'm talking about like spatter paint. It was like the Jackson Pollock.
But then you could never use it. That's
and,
pointless.
Well, no, you'd hang it on the wall. It was art. I mean, college art, mind you, but it was folk art. There we see.
I am so glad we did not get together, really, until later in life.
I think at one point,
I think I would have found you foolish.
I think we painted Starry Night on one of them.
I think we found you foolish.
Maybe a little Monet on another.
No, I think I would have found you foolish.
Oh, you don't now?
I mean, I do now. Just as much as I found that blueberry daiquiri foolish. I literally was like, what is that? Like under the WTF section on the worksheet, I put Kramer, Buckteeth, blueberry daiquiri.
Well, the fact that he gets it so quickly, too, they make it there's not really a question about whether or not they have blueberry daiquiris at that bar. It just comes right out.
And I have to say, the Wheel of Fish thing, they ruined perfectly good fish all day long.
Because they were filming it in a hot warehouse, and apparently it was a little ripe.
Perfectly good fish that people could eat. White people. Sorry, it's
Look,
true.
I don't think Getty took the fish home either, so...
No one took the fish home because it was ruined.
Yeah.
I'm just saying. So that's what I've got for production notes. Do you have anything else to add?
Well, I do like that the director, Jay Levy, was actually Gandhi in the Gandhi 2 commercials. I've always called it Gandhi 2 The Revenge because I thought that sounded cooler, I guess. In one of our previous podcasts, I called it that. It's not what it's called, but I think because that was always one of my favorite pieces, even though I had not yet seen the film Gandhi, I knew enough to know what this was making fun of. And apparently when they were filming it, he actually hit the guy's head on the top of the Ferrari multiple times and put a dent in it, and they were nervous because they didn't know if the insurance for the film covered that, and it did. So
yeah, they also hit God, what's his poor name? Bob, yeah. It also hit David Bowie, which everybody thinks it's David Bowie. It's not David Bowie.
Probably better that, Bowie went for Labyrinth instead of UHF. I don't think those pants would have done quite as well in this film.
I don't think Bowie would have gone for UHF.
But can you imagine the Goblin King's Playhouse? Could have been a whole different show. He would have had that Escher-like thing in there, and would kidnap the children from the show and make people go through games to get them back.
I thought it couldn't be any worse, but now it is.
Now that'll be stuck in your mind for a while.
That description. And on to soundtrack smashes. Hey!
No.
Yes, we were done, aren't we? With production notes?
No,
Well, hurry it up, mister.
Well, since there's not much to say about Victoria Jackson in this movie, they don't give her much to do. But I do think it's cool that his connection with her helped him to do Smells Like Nirvana. He couldn't get in touch with Nirvana's people. And so since Victoria Jackson was on Saturday Night Live and Nirvana was playing, he talked to him and asked to do the song. And he says, well, as long as you're not going to do it about food, because a lot of Weird Al songs have to do with food. And he's like, oh, no, actually, it's about how no one can understand your lyrics. And Kurt Cobain was like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Probably was listening to it at that time, but I just wasn't the biggest fan.
So you weren't watching Saturday Night Live just to see Nirvana?
No, I wasn't watching Saturday Night Live, period. I never have been. That's also a white people thing, I feel like.
Well,
I'm just going to say, on Saturday nights, when I was old enough to stay up that late or whatever, I was out. I was out clubbing. I was out clubbing from 14. So I really wasn't home on Saturday night to watch SNL.
But tell me about your feelings on Benny Hill.
I love Benny Hill.
Uh-huh.
But I love Benny Hill for all the wrong reasons. And one of them is that I was really young and in Jamaica.
The sexist, dirty old man.
Watching this sexist, dirty old man on the only station in Jamaica, because it's a British show and there was a lot of British shows happening. And I would have insomnia as a child and I would get to stay up, and the adults couldn't outlast me. They were done. Like 10 o'clock, they're done because life is different. You get up really early. They're dealing with the other cousins / kids. Like, they're dealing with everybody else. But I was pretty quiet, and people went to bed or they just passed out. And I would stay up watching hours upon hours of inappropriate Benny Hill from like the time I was 8. And probably younger. I would just watch a ton of Benny Hill, and I was like, oh my God, this guy is naked and he's running all over the place. Oh, everybody's naked and running all over the place. So I'm not saying I didn't watch inappropriate white people shit. I'm just telling you that it was just different. And then by the time I hit 14, I was just not at home.
But no taste for Barney Miller, apparently. Because wasn't that a regular on Jamaican TV too?
No, Barney Miller wasn't a regular.
I thought it was. I thought
Barney
you saw it here?
Barney Miller was, so I would spend summers with my family in Jamaica, and then the rest of the time I was here or whatever. And when I was here and at home, Barney Miller would be on all the time. And it's generally that, 4:30, 5 o'clock, 5 to 6 o'clock, when the only thing that was on was news and or Barney Miller No, Star Trek was on the weekends, but it was Barney Miller or bust. It was Barney Miller or the news.
Now
we
that's
didn't
a
have
t-shirt.
Cable.
Barney Miller or bust.
Pretty much. We didn't have cable, and so I watched a lot of Barney Miller. So there just wasn't a lot during that time period. It was either 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. or 5 to 6 p.m. It was news, Barney Miller. That's it. I watched Barney Miller. Just like on the weekends, I watched a lot of Star Trek. It wasn't... And I hate those things now because I felt like I didn't have a choice.
But you recently had a Star Trek redemption through watching Star Trek II as interpreted by Benjamin R. Harrison and Adam Pranica of The Greatest Generation. podcast when we saw them live doing Greatest Gen Con.
I mean, I wouldn't call it a revival. I found it to be funny. I'm glad that I went and I watched it. I recognize that I know more Star Trek things than I ever actually knew in my brain because of all those weekends that I spent watching it because there was nothing else on. And it was raining outside and I was little and I couldn't go to like the pool or something. And I was tired of, I had finished reading the books that I had. Like, that's pretty much when I watched Star Trek. It's like, there's nothing else possibly to do for a child. I watched Star Trek. And I couldn't play board games because I was an only child. So really, my things that I could do at that point without some sort of assistance or going somewhere and it was raining outside was watch Star Trek. So that's what I did.
And I have to redo that. It was poor. It's Greatest Gen Con! That was more appropriate.
Stop staring the cats. All right. Are we on a soundtrack or no?
Well, I wanted to mention that the title that Weird Al wanted was The Vidiot, which, being as UHF was already disappearing at the time, I guess it, again, makes it a bit of a historical artifact in that way. But the crazy thing is that when it's gone into foreign markets, they've, like, worked that title in, and so it was called The Vidiot from UHF in one country, and then it's had some other crazy names, like in Mexico it's called the TV Crazies, or Cable Go, Air for Everyone, the most wacky station in the city, but my favorite, which of course could only come from the inventors of Schadenfreude, the Germans, they have it as Broadcast of Limited Hope, which has to be the most perfect unintentional title for UHF that could have possibly existed.
Oh, boy. That's how we feel about that. Anytime you're ready for a soundtrack, I'm ready.
Oh, yeah. Ginger Baker of the rock band Cream wanted to be the homeless guy.
So the soundtrack for UHF was released on July 18th, 1989. It was officially titled UHF Original Motion Picture Soundtrack and Other Stuff because it contained other things other than what was in UHF. The score was actually done by John. It was done by John Duprez, but it was omitted. Like it wasn't actually on the UHF original. I don't know what that. Okay, well, it was omitted, and it was what's good trivia is that it was the last of Weird Al's albums that was released on vinyl until 2011, which was, and then Apocalypse was released on vinyl, at least in the U.S.
Apocalypse.
Is it Al?
Apocalypse.
Okay, Apocalypse. Sorry. Oh my gosh. See, I told you we had a fan in the house. You can find it on vinyl for like $10, but that's including shipping. So, you know, it's like a $3 or $4 record for like mint or near mint. Never went gold, never went platinum. Sales were pretty dismal.
Well, did you choose your soundtrack?
I mean, it's money for nothing.
Yeah.
Slash Beverly Hillbillies.
Looky here, people, listen to my story. A little story about a man named Jed.
And it is a perfect example of how Al can take something that exists and make it his own and make it funny with just the right words, but it's perfect and perfectly funny. Again, it's part of why the film was not what I remembered it was, because I've heard so much of the music since, and I am consistently impressed not only with re-listening to older material, but the new material, because I always think it's genius. So
no, and he does. He's great at parody. I think that's really, I mean, that's hard. You know, you always want to do everything and be everything to everyone. Not that he's a one-trick pony. I don't think so. I think he does things visually, right, that we find appealing. I think it's, you know, the parody piece, he's obviously very into, and that's his love and his passion, and that's what it should be about. Like, whatever you're producing should be about your love and your passion. If you don't have love and passion for something, it's probably not going to end up well. It just is not. I mean, that's just the reality of it. So sometimes you throw your hat into the ring thinking, I can do that. That I can do, but sometimes you can't. That maybe might not be the right route for you. So I think he just maybe found that out.
Yeah, it also, Mad Magazine doesn't translate well to film, and even though a lot of the inspiration of the style came from there, even the name, because Alfred E. Newman is the character that is the mascot of Mad Magazine, and his character of George Newman, which is kind of funny because then Michael Richards was on Seinfeld and there was a George and a Newman in there, but no connection, I'm sure. But yeah, I think a lot of it being inspired by that type of comedy, it did not translate as well.
No, so I don't know. I think he does what he does very well, and sometimes when you do things very well, like I said, you want to branch out.
And I think that, and I know his most recent tour was his more obscure original songs, and I like a lot of the originals too. They're not as popular, but that's why my choice in this one is UHF.
Don't worry about your laundry, forget about your job. You gotta crank up the volume, yank off the knob. We got it all. We got it all on UHF.
It is an original, and it is, I actually think it's a fun song to listen to. I always enjoy listening to UHF, even if I'm not watching the movie. And maybe that was part of the problem, is that I've enjoyed the song so much over the years that I was associating my enjoyment of the song with my enjoyment.
You tuned out the bad stuff
of the movie. So now, had they done something, they might have actually jumped into MST 3000 territory had he kind of collaborated a little more with his old friend Joel Hodgson, who created MST 3000. He was one of the originators, and some of the comedy was based on their interactions, and Philo was based on Hodgson as well. He was supposedly going to play the role, or was offered the role, and he didn't think he was a good enough actor to do it. But as the story goes, anyway. But yeah, Joel Hodgson, and Weird Al it makes perfect sense that the two of them would know each other because there's a lot of crossover in their style of comedy. And had they gone more to that style and done the movie a little more that way, it actually would have been, I think funnier. In fact, I did not watch all the special features, but supposedly in the commentary they do a little bit of MST 3000 style joking in there.
Yeah, that's all I've got for UHF. I'm probably never going to watch it again. Sorry, Al. But I will go to your concerts again, and I will listen to your music.
Well, and I've explained why I showed it to you and why I thought we were going to enjoy watching it, but I also can understand why we did not. Though, like I said, it is taking a lot for me to be as honest about my disappointment in the overall product, even though there are moments that still make me chuckle when I think about them. I think I will watch those clips on YouTube and not watch all the pieces in between that I don't need to see.
Yeah, maybe we'll put up some of those clips on our blog. I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, and every time that I see him...
Like Spatulicity. See, that's your favorite. Like, you're laughing about it. It's not all bad. It's not all bad.
But, I don't know if I need to see the Twinkie dog again. Apparently, he had to eat so many of those for the takes that he became a vegetarian because it made him sick eating all those damn Twinkie dogs. Well, it's
a Twinkie with a hot dog with squeezed cheese. That is just bad. That's bad. That's bad business right there. That's just heartburn and gas. I mean, that's just so bad.
Even on a young stomach.
Yeah, it's heartburn and gas. It's definitely gas on a young stomach. I don't know about the heart. No, it's got to be heartburn. Oh, those hot dogs. Oh, God, so much.
You know where I think this would be good, though? I think a drive-in. I feel like a drive-in, it would have been perfect at a drive-in. So.
No.
See, I'm still trying to find ways.
No.
Instead,
you should give it up.
I'm going to go and listen to his polka version of Hamilton to cleanse my mind of all the other things.
There you go.
Because,
you should add that onto the webpage.
If you haven't seen it, even if you haven't seen Hamilton, this is a brilliant version.
Oh, summary of it.
Yeah. I actually watched the version where where he's playing it for Lin-Manuel Miranda, where it's he and Jimmy Fallon are listening to Weird Al's version of it, and just the looks on their faces. I think that's the one to watch.
I dig it.
So, we didn't even mention that Fran Drescher is in here.
Oh my God, that's actually a tragedy. Fran Drescher is probably the best good in the entire film. Fran Drescher is amazing just as Fran Drescher. Like, Fran Drescher plays the best, most annoying person in like life, who doesn't think they're being annoying, but they're annoying, but it's okay and it's endearing. So Fran Drescher is probably the best good ever.
And Billy Barty is in here, so yeah, and he's been in a billion things, but he's fun as Noodles.
Just a billion, not a bajillion?
Well, no, who's been in a bajillion is, what's his name? Bob. What is his? David Bowie.
David Bowie.
He has been in everything. I mean, and he's one of those guys who he can play multiple characters within the same series of a show, and you forget that he played somebody else a few months before. He was in multiple episodes of a few of these, but he's been in, and this is just a small sampling, X-Files, 90210, CSI, Grey's Anatomy, Shameless, Entourage, Criminal Minds, Time Tracks, Fresh Prince, not Fresh Prince and Bel-Air as separate things, but the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. ER, he was even in A Few Good Men, and he was the voice of IHOP commercials for like 6 or 7 years. So he was in a little bit of everything, and the man works.
As well you should in Hollywood.
Yeah,
That's
but I
the only way
mean,
you're gonna get a check.
But yeah, he's one of those perfect every guy, any guy, but he's that perfect utility player.
Anything else? Because I keep wanting to wrap it up, and you're like going through all the notes.
I keep feeling the need to defend. Weird Al outlasted all the critics, and with his music and everything.
But I don't think that's any. I don't think that we need to defend anything. It's like. I
feel very protective.
I agree, but we've sort of already stated like, hey, this is one of those things where we love the artist, and sometimes you don't like the art. That's okay. I mean, not everybody likes every album. Like, I can say with very certainty, I love Imagine Dragons. I don't love their newest album. That's okay. That's fine. I'm sort of like, oh, I can't even put it in my playlist right now. Like, that's what I'm trying to say. So that's not bad. It's just you don't care for a piece. I don't think that that's wrong. You don't have to not care for the piece. You don't have to care for every piece that your person puts out. I mean, I feel like the only person who I would there's not many people who I care like for every single piece that they put out all the time. That's just not always possible.
Yeah, I know. I
mean, even my beloved John Cusack, who I freaking adore, I don't love every single thing that he's been in. I mean, I don't love a lot of things that he's been in. I mean, I probably don't love 20% of things that he's been in because he's been in so many damn movies. So I think that's okay. I think if you love 80% of their stuff and you can just say, hey, as an artist, overwhelmingly, I love your stuff. And then the other 20% you sort of forgive and you're like, all right, you had to make some money. Or somebody offered you something that you maybe always wanted to do and you couldn't really pass it up. I mean, they shopped this script around for 3 years. For 3 years. They wanted to just do this movie and it was just sort of like this pipe dream and then they got to do it. Okay.
And it's the producer of it. One of the producers was the producer of Das Boot. So it's a crazy thing that, let's see, Rocky, it's, who is it? Gene Kirkwood was connected to it. And let's see. No, Gene Kirkwood was the producer of Rocky and John Hyde was the producer of Das Boot. And they were connected to it, which I think one of them who had been working on one of the serious films was like, I just wanted to do something fun. You know, and to them, to the producers too, this was a fun project.
It's okay. So I just still can't believe it. It rated higher than probably like Kidco. What else did it rate higher than? It rated higher than Legend of Billie Jean on IMDb. Like it rates higher. Like, everybody just be truthful with yourselves. This is not a 7 out of 10. This is just not a 7 out of 10 at all. And it's definitely not higher than a 7 out of 10. So I don't know where you're coming with this 77% on Rotten Tomatoes BS. That's all dudes.
I just can't keep having to throw out trivia and other things. Now, what did you think of the Philo transforming into his alien state to go home.
I was asleep.
You didn't even see that. It was very large Marge-ish. And speaking of, the guy who plays R.J. Fletcher's son, John Paragon, he was Jambi, the genie, on Pee-wee's Playhouse. I knew he sounded familiar, but yeah, that was one of his bigger roles, was playing Jambi. That's a fun little extra to distract from everything else. Yeah, and I got nothing else.
Yeah. I was waiting for you to be done.
Yeah, I think...
Now starting to play Bejeweled on my phone. No, it wasn't really, but it's sort of like the movie, like, oh, are we done? Are we wrapping up anytime soon?
Yeah, I think we're at the end point.
Good.
And
I think we spent too much time on this episode.
Probably.
This is stressing my husband out greatly.
Yeah.
Greatly. He's like sweating. He's like breaking out into a sweat about this. It's not hot in our house.
This is one of the hardest that I've had to do. So
why? Because you didn't love it?
And I really wanted to. I think I have to go to Weird Al's next concert just to pay my penance.
All right. So thank you guys for joining us this evening, or whenever you're listening to us. It's evening here. I've had a Red Bull.
Well, it's evening wherever you are because you probably fell asleep while listening to it,
especially
even if it was in the middle
part.
Of the day.
Good night. Shows you we were just parodying the movie. So please rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast, and don't base it off of this podcast episode. Check out our website at youhaven'tseenwhatmovie.com, and also our social media on Insta, Facebook, and Twitter at YouHaven'tSeenWhatMovie. And give us feedback, not on this podcast episode, but in general on how you like this, how you like the format. Oh, you know what I haven't been doing for Good, Bad, and Ugly? I haven't been whistling. That's a bullshit on my part.
Yeah. So
remember,
be kind.
Rewind.
And then put it on the shelf and just look at it.
Never to open up the VHS cassette ever, or DVD. Don't pay money for this.
No, pay money for it. Pay money. Put it in the collection. Give Al the money. I should have said the ugly of this movie was when they blow up some model railroad buildings at Stanley's workshop.
Oh, right.
My father would
not approve.
Had a conniption watching them blow up some models there.
Exactly. How much work goes into one of those models?
And that was really like the Tulsa Model Railroad Club that had provided that stuff. So I think they built the buildings to explode, but the trains that are going around, which do not explode, were from the real Model Railroad Club.
Oh.
But I don't think those buildings were built to scale, so it was okay to blow them up.
Okay. That's fair. All right. So, yeah, that concludes this episode about freaking 3 minutes ago. What the hell are we still doing here?
I'm still trying to redeem myself. Good night, everybody.
Good night. And good luck. Don't watch the movie.
And what better way to say I love you than with the gift of a spatula?